Welcome back to the Shared Voices podcast. It's been another wild week. We got a couple of guests here again from the last two episodes that we're going to keep the conversation going. I really enjoyed it, guys.
Yeah, it's been great.
I love your guys' willing to be open and honest about stuff, because that's the biggest thing holding us back. So first of all, thank you both for being on again, and I'm sure there'll be many more down the road that we record together. But if you're just now tuning in for the first time, this is a Shared Voices podcast. This is put on by the 1042 Project. My name is Daniel Deffenbaugh. I'm the founder and the director of the 1042 Project, and we are a 501c3 nonprofit, and we are here as a community for our first responders that are dealing with any of the stresses that come with the job, as far as mental health and some of the addictions and things that come along that. Our community, our nonprofit is set up for people to be able to come to and get the help they need, and to help them get to the resources that they need to enhance their life here on Earth. This job gets dark. There's a lot of things that happen that it's hard to process, and a lot of us feel alone. And the 1042 project is here for you guys to be able to come and be part of and hear from other first responders, and allow us through our events and through our resources to connect you to any and all types of resources that you may need to get you through the journey in right now, whether it's mental, whether it's financial, whether it's drug addiction, sex addiction, adultery, whatever it may be. There's all sorts of things that we deal with as first responders that are sometimes hard to deal with and hard to talk with, to where you can go and talk somewhere where there's no guilt or shame, and you can just lay it all on the table and be heard and understood. And that's what this organization's about. It's about being real and being honest and helping people get to the healing that they need. So again, thank you both for being on. Let's just carry this right on. Last episode, Sam, we got to hear some more of your story through your career, and Cory, we got to hear yours in the episode before that. Now that we've gone through that, and of course everybody's heard my story that's listened to this podcast, let's dive into some of the things that we've been talking about since last week and at last week's meeting. And a lot of it, for some people may seem like common sense, but it's not common sense for the people that aren't doing it. And what we got to do, last week when we had lunch, was get to sit down and share with each other our life's journey, and there's a lot of healing that happened there. And I just want to go ahead and continue that today, because we learned last episode we talked about stigma and some other things. As we jump into this episode, I do want to point out we are an Iowa Out organization. So we help our first responders right here in Iowa first. And as we grow, we will continue to expand across the country. But we are an Iowa Out organization, and the three of us that are sitting in this room right now are all either current or former Iowa first responders. And honestly, when God first put this calling on my heart to start this organization, Sam and Cory, I thought, oh, we're in Iowa. Like, why? Most people look at Iowa and think nothing bad happens there. And when I was first thinking this, I thought nobody will ever listen to us because we're just small town Iowa, right? We're the Midwest. And really what I've learned is it's quite the opposite. There is a whole different element to being a small town Midwest first responder, as opposed to New York, LA, Vegas, and some of those places. And I'm not taking away from anything that they deal with. They have the same trauma and stress as us, but it's unique wherever you live. It's a different it's a different monster, and especially for small town Midwest. I know one of the things that I struggled with is when we get a call, we get the call from the beginning to the end. We don't get to pass it off to a specialist, a lead detective, a crime scene unit, a photography team unit. We don't get to call in all those resources because we just don't have them. In Iowa, Our resources are thin, and there's not enough. There's not as many resources here as there is around the country, and we're hoping for that to change, and we're looking for that to change. But guys, I kind of want to dive in with you guys with this episode, if you don't mind, and let's talk about some of the small town issues that we deal with. And the reason why I want to bring that up is a lot of our listeners work in small communities. Some of them are volunteer firefighters, some of them are small town police officers, some of them are big city police officers in Des Moines. But we have several different types of people, and one of the ones that I feel sometimes that get forgotten about the most are some of our smaller communities. And in the town where the three of us all worked at one time is, and I'd have to check the census, but it's around, I think, 16,000, maybe 18,000 people.
Yeah.
Is it around there?
I think so.
So we're not talking a big metropolis, but for this area in our county, and we're the biggest town around. And the three of us worked there, and there's a lot of challenges and things that we were dealing with throughout our careers that neither one of us were talking about with each other or knew about. A lot of times in the mental health world, we like to compare our trauma. We like to compare the stuff we've seen or how we're feeling. We can go to a fatality of a young kid at, dead in the middle of the road. And there goes my mind.
No, I feel like I know where you're going with that.
I need some help, brother.
We like to trump that, oh, you had this dead kid in the road. Well, mine was decapitated.
Right. And why should I be hurting? Because, saw a call last night on the news that Des Moines dealt with this, and that call was so much worse. This is just a kid that's in the middle of the road, and we minimize it, and we downplay it. But I'm here to tell you, those feelings don't change. You can try to minimize it all you want. Those feelings are real,
and they don't go away.
They don't go away.
No.
And the worst thing we can do is minimize them, because we're from small town Iowa. We should be able to handle it. We should be able to deal with the calls that we have. We're not working in downtown New York, and that's the biggest flipping lie that first responders have. We don't compare our trauma. Trauma is trauma. If you hurt, you hurt. If you see something that affects you, you see something that affects you. Trauma does not skip population. It doesn't skip full-time, part-time, or volunteer. It just doesn't skip it. A lot of our small town firefighters, police officers are being forgotten about, suffering in silence, and feel like there's nobody that understands them. But I can tell you right now, between the three of us sitting right here and our whole 1042 organization, we get it, we understand it, and we're going to make sure you have a voice. And we'll be your voice until then. And we want to have you on eventually to share your voice. But that's why we do this, is to be a voice for the ones that a lot of people aren't thinking about. And that's the stigma, and that's the whole attitude that our organization is trying to smash. I know that's a long lead into this episode, but just wanted to get that out there because I dealt with that. And I don't know how about you guys, when you look back on your career, did you sometimes minimize, or did you think to yourself, I'm a rural Iowa firefighter, suck it up, this isn't Vegas, baby? Did you guys deal with any of that kind of stuff? And if so, Sam, let's start with you. Were you comparing yourself to others, and how'd that impact you? And looking back now, what do you say about that?
Yeah, I think that's an amazing question to ask, and something maybe I haven't reflected on as much as I should have. My work history being in numerous small towns, even smaller than Indianola, oftentimes being the only resource that's available outside of, maybe one town police officer, one county deputy.
Yeah.
Actually, I recall a time that at nighttime, the night shift I was working, the county deputy was on call from home. It wasn't a patrolling deputy. So while, yes, I was in that small town, it was, you didn't get time to wrap up in this isn't Des Moines. Like, I had a murder in that small town. Mm-hmm. Things that you say happen in Des Moines, but you didn't get wrapped up in that. It was more so, I don't have a choice. I have to be the strong person here. There is nobody to fall back onto. Likewise, I don't think it necessarily depends on requires a big traumatic call. True. And just as you were discussing, I think trauma, we like to say, is associated to the call, how mm-hmm. big and bad the call was. I fully disagree. It has to do with your heart. As you were, doing this lead in, one thought that came to me, or, one thing that I carry with me was, while I was working at Osceola's hospital, we had a child that came in that claimed to be raped by her dad. I poured my entire heart into this girl for 3 hours doing everything we could for her, to find out she was lying to us. She was mad at her dad.
Yeah.
So, I mean, ultimately there was no trauma that should have existed, but there is, because I poured my heart into it.
Absolutely.
You know, it wasn't a violent call. It wasn't, you know, it wasn't the graphic gore that, you know, we often associate with trauma.
Yes.
And there's numerous calls like that in my career that I can think of, whether it be, you know, a little old lady that just had a nice impact on me because she asked me to go to church because she liked how I was, you know, interacting with her, to, you know, those are the good things. And we don't put a lot of weight into those, and we should, but why would I remember that? I've been on thousands of calls, and that one sticks out to me. Again, it's how you pour your heart into it.
Yes.
So I don't feel like I really answered your question in terms of the comparison of the big city versus rural community. I think my answer to that is you didn't have time. You when you were the only resource, you couldn't compare. You put so much more weight on your shoulders because there was no other option. There was no out, nobody to tag in and say, hey, I need a break from this.
Yes. Yes. And everybody's different. That's why we all, you know, we say, well, we all go through the same thing, kind of, you know, we all know what it's like to go through, but we all go through, everything we go through is different for everybody. And I know for me, it was the big comparisons. For you, it was like, you had no other choice.
Mm-hmm.
Like it all, but with that also comes a lot of the pressure because you're it.
Yep. Yeah. What if I screw this up?
Yeah. You don't have a team to turn to. You don't have somebody higher up that was there to say, hey man, why didn't you tell us to do that? It's on you.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Yeah. No pressure, right?
Right. No, I mean, I can think of numerous times where the call didn't go as we anticipated, or we got thrown that major curveball. And sometimes that was worse than the trauma of the call, because it's like, okay, now not only do we have this bigger, higher profile thing, especially for the community I'm in, but now I got thrown a curveball, and is everyone going to say I botched it?
Yep. Cory, where are you at on this, man? We've talked about it. I mean,
coming from living, born and raised in Indianola, to working here as a first responder, to now working, I wouldn't say big city, but I mean, it's metro, so we respond everywhere.
And you got resources right next door.
Everywhere.
Yeah.
I mean, honestly, everywhere. So like Sam was saying, like I remember, I say the old days, but there used to be 2 people at night. That was it. So it could be me and Sam, and who knows what else was coming. It was just us.
And you don't know how many calls are coming in.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. But for me, small town, especially for volunteers, like you go on a lot of people you know.
Yeah, that's the thing.
Like I was born and raised here. I know a lot of people. I know, I coded one of my good friends' infant, and that kicks you square in the face, or going on somebody's friend that or the car wrecks.
Mm-hmm.
You get a fender bender in Urbandale, Iowa, and they're like, oh man, that was a good one. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Like you have 118 square miles, I think we covered.
Yep.
For Indianola.
And then all the outlying towns. Like you get some crazy stuff. But we don't, they're volunteers. That's a big thing, especially as full-time or professional firefighters. They're just follies. Well, they train just like us. I was one.
Yep.
I started off as a volunteer, worked my way up to paid on call, and then part-time. Now I'm full-time. They go through the exact same stuff we do, but they don't have resources. They don't, like when they get back from a call, they don't have another 18 hours on shift to sit there and talk about it.
Yep.
They're done. Like they go home. So that's where I come from. Like, cause here you'd go on a call, you come back, either do your report or restock the ambulance. Hey, you need anything? Nope. All right. Not saying, hey, like that really messed me up a lot.
Yeah.
Like that was a bad call, but we're just going to brush it off. Like,
go ahead.
There's just added weight to that too on the rural community. I was fortunate in that I'd lived multiple parts of the state, came over here for paramedic school. So, in terms of Indianola, the communities I worked in, I didn't have those personal relationships.
Mm-hmm.
Didn't know a lot of people like Cory did, but these guys that do, especially the volunteer world, but it doesn't matter paid or not in these small communities, everybody knows you and knows who you know and wants to know about that call.
Yes.
We discussed in the last 2 episodes not telling your spouse about calls because that's not their burden to bear. But now everywhere you go, whether it be the grocery store, hey, what happened?
Yes.
You know, oh my God, are you okay? And they want to glorify it, and you can't escape it.
And they
You
want the
don't have time to process it. You know, and then there's the, well, I've got HIPAA to worry about. I don't think it's ethical to be telling you, you know, about my traumas,
Right.
in the details of this. And frankly, they're just doing it to gossip.
Yep.
And you know it. So when you're in these small communities, you can't escape it. You literally cannot escape it.
No.
Yes.
Nope.
As soon as the sirens are going off, your cell phone starts to vibrate. People are calling. They're wanting to know what's going on.
Yep. They're flipping on their scanners at home to, you know.
Yeah. My mom's been a manager at Casey's for 20 some years. So I mean, she knows everybody. Like, even as a kid, I couldn't get away with anything because she knew about it before the next day, right?
Yeah.
But same thing. Like, we go on a bad car wreck and she'd be like, hey, I heard so and so was in this wreck. It's like, I can't tell you. 2, I don't want to talk about it. And then my brother would call. And then same thing, man. You go to a grocery store and you see an old friend and be like, hey, man, I heard so and so, you know, had this. And you're like, just, I'm going to go shopping.
Yeah.
And how many of those people ever approached you and said, hey, are you doing all right?
None. They want to know every detail. And it's like, dude.
So they can share it.
Right. And it's like, you know what? I relive this every day.
Mm-hmm.
Like, there's multiple calls that just, it's like you hit rewind and then play. Rewind and then play.
Over and over and over.
Over and over. And then sometimes when you start dimming that down, you can forget about it for a little bit. Some people say, hey, what's the worst call you've been on?
Don't you hate that question?
Oh, dude, I want to be like with my kid. I just want to flick him in the mouth. Be like, dude, like you don't say that.
Man,
you don't ask that.
I heard that so much in my career. I still hear it to this day, especially when you talk, when they know what I do now for a living with our organization. That's one of the first things they want to talk about. A lot of times you'll introduce and they'll hear, and the first thing they'll say is, what's the worst call?
Mm-hmm.
Man, please never do that. If you're listening, never do that.
Yeah.
I think that's a sign of, especially if someone in the profession, a professional immaturity as well.
There you go.
They haven't experienced it. They haven't experienced what is that question actually asking, And I think there's an aggression that when I get to ask that comes out too. It's like, so you really want to know what the worst call is on. You really want to know how that felt. Like, okay, I will make you feel the pain. And, you read stuff about it online, or I've read a few good articles about it where it's like, you can watch people squirm as you're telling it about it.
Yeah.
But it's like, did you, and that's not responsible on our side either.
Right.
But it's like, people don't know what they're asking, but, especially in the profession, it's a professional immaturity, because at some point you're going to be there where it's like, okay, now I know what they're actually bringing back.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And when we talk about being open, honest, and transparent with people and talking about your feelings, we don't necessarily mean your old teacher Dorothy at the Hy-Vee that runs into you and ask you a question about your career, or heard that you had dealt with trauma, and they just come up and start asking you those questions. You don't have to talk with people like that. You owe them nothing. When we talk about being open and honest, we're talking about doing it in a healthy way, like we're doing right now with fellow first responders, fellow professionals, and stuff like that. That when we encourage people to talk, we encourage them to talk to people who are safe. And the reason why I say that is there's a lot of bad advice out there. And if you're not a first responder or used to dealing with trauma, when we start to share with people our trauma, you'll see them quiver and shake, and they blurt stuff out that makes no sense. They're just trying to come up with an answer because you didn't hurt them. You hit their heart with so much trauma that they're asking you questions they should never be asking, and just know that it's okay when that happens to walk away. Do you guys agree with that?
100%.
Yeah. It's okay. We don't have to be open and honest with everybody. Our spouses and stuff, yes, we have to be. Our spouses can handle it. To go back to what we were talking about earlier, we have to be able to talk to them, but we do not owe it to our old teachers, our old babysitters, or whoever it may be, anybody you run into in your life. You don't have to share your trauma with them, because sometimes when you go to share your trauma with people who are like that aren't used to it, their reaction can scare you and reel you back to where you never want to say it again.
Right.
Because people say things like literally just blurt out, "Oh my F," and like when you go to and they freak out and you're like, "Oh my gosh, I tried to tell this person, but now they're
Yep.
losing their flipping mind." So now you're like, now I'm causing them trauma. You shut up, you reel back in, and if that's the only one time you're going to try talking to somebody, please don't let it to be a stranger or somebody that's not.
Right. Because it only, for me, it took a lot of courage. So like the post on Facebook,
Yeah.
I haven't been on Facebook for years, and I just got back on to reconnect with people. But my first post was my story and what I went through, and it took somewhat of a lot just to open up and be like, "Hey, this is my story. I want everybody to know." So if you get the courage to talk to somebody, and that happens, man, you're on step one again.
Yep.
Of trying to open up because, well, I just messed that person up.
Yep.
Saying,
Yep.
I don't want to talk anymore.
Yep. You scared them.
You scared them. Now I'm scared. I don't want to talk. I definitely don't want to talk now because who else am I going to offend or scare? Or am I going to traumatize them?
And now you feel broken. You
Yeah.
feel like you're just you're one of a kind that is broken and lost.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not the truth.
Yeah. Well, and feel free to disagree with this, but I think the thing you guys taught me is there is an appropriate level of censorship.
Yes.
You know, I think as I'm talking to Cassandra, I don't give her the gory details because she doesn't need it. You know, she understands if I say, "Hey, I'm struggling with this," that means what it means. But now, as I've talked to you guys, like I think we're much more comfortable sharing details with each other, but it's never done in a competitive way. I think that's the other side of it is. I've had people reach out to me after, certain calls where it's like, "Hey, they can tell I'm struggling. They want to make me talk about it." But then as I give them the little bit to try and get them to get off my back, it becomes, well, this was what my call was.
Yeah.
And it becomes a one-upping thing, and that doesn't work. But I do find, at least personally, it tends to come pretty natural. Once you start talking to somebody, you determine who you can get to that level of detail with.
Yes.
And not have it be a competition conversation. But I think in all cases there is appropriate levels of censorship. I think, as I think about Cassandra, as long as I'm telling her what's going on, it doesn't matter the details. Just she needs to know: am I struggling or am I okay?
Yeah, and like we talked about last week when we were at lunch, because a lot of people I talk with, they don't talk to their spouses. They come home from work and they tell them nothing, just like I did in my first marriage, right? I said nothing. I kept it to myself, let it build up. And like I said last week to you guys, when we do that, our spouses, our loved ones, if we don't communicate with them, their brain is going to start coming up with scenarios and situations and things inside their mind that a lot of times are going to be a lot worse than if we were just able to share with them what's going on inside of us. Again, that doesn't mean you have to explain what the innards of somebody look like during the call, but we can tell them that, I went on the call today and honestly, babe, it set me back. Like, I've been triggered ever since. My anxiety level's high. The person that died, I know his brother. I'm not coping with this well. So right now I'm home, but I'm full of energy and I'm not really quite sure what to do with it. And you tell them that out of love, and you tell them that because you don't want them to start coming up with their own scenario. And the next thing you know, they think you're hiding, or they think you're cheating on them, or you're doing all this other stuff that isn't true. So we have to speak truth into the ones we love, and
Right.
put and give them the truth.
I think to add on to that too is not only tell them what you're going through, but like you just said, like it was a trigger. Like this call triggered me for this reason. So now they know, like whenever I get it, I still tell Kaylin, like we're still very good friends. Like I still have triggers. So if something triggers me and I kind of get in that lull, she knows like what happened.
Yeah, it's
What triggered you?
not that you just turn into a dick all of a sudden and you don't like her,
Right.
and she didn't do anything wrong,
No.
but
And
that's how they can take it.
Yes. So if they don't know, that's what happened. Right? Because obviously there's certain smells, sounds, whatever that can just automatically shut you down.
Times a year.
Yes. Dude,
It's so, I won't ever say it's an anniversary date for me, but it's like, as I start to be like, hey, why am I just off? I'll be like, oh, we're kind of coming up on this time of year again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Certain weather patterns I notice, if that was something that stuck out to me on that particular call, it's like, oh, this feels just like that day.
Yeah.
Yep.
There's little things.
Yep.
Just little things. I mean, certain things that just set you off.
Yes.
And I think, again, going back to the spouses, is the honesty. Like, you have to tell them, I'm not trying to be a dick here.
Yeah.
This is what happened. Like, and they can see that, and they can help you or try to eliminate those bad things, the triggers.
Yeah.
Or at bare minimum, I mean, again, if, hey, my mood switched, I mean, her being crabby back at me is not going to help anything. So if she understands why I'm upset, why I'm not the same person I was 5 minutes ago, having her not try and start the fight with me,
Yes.
you know, because that's kind of my thing with Cassandra, especially right now as we're very much delving into this change is, you know, I'll be upfront. She even asked me about today. She's like, "Are you going to be okay after this?"
Oh,
And
that's awesome.
you know, I appreciate the question, but my response was, "Please don't do that. Please don't assume every time I want to talk about feelings now or am doing something different that you have to check in on me, because that'll shut me down from it."
Okay.
You know, and
Again,
so,
we're all different, so
yeah,
it's good to know.
right.
yeah. So with her, it's like, hey, I appreciate that I opened up to you. I appreciate that you care, but give me a little bit more trust to say, if I am struggling, like, let's keep going down this road. Now,
Yeah.
if in 2 days I'm not acting right and I haven't said anything, maybe you should ask.
Yeah.
But, you know, as kind of that preemptive, are you going to be okay with this? Well, I mean, give me a little bit of grace there.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think those conversations are super important because, yeah, I mean, maybe I'm triggered and I just need to process it myself. I don't want to be coddled. I don't want her to, you know, all of a sudden feel like we have to avoid driving a certain route because there was a car accident at this intersection, or
She doesn't need to handle you with kid gloves.
exactly.
Yeah.
So, you know, just the awareness that, hey, if you see something like this, it's okay to ask if I'm okay, or, you know, I'm not actually mad at you. Like, don't try and start the fight, because previously when I wouldn't talk about it, then that's what it would turn into, is she'd get coarse with me, and then it might not even be something relevant, but that's what we're arguing over. And it's like, okay, now I just don't want to be around you.
Yep.
And
you shut down.
then I shut down, I go into isolation, and we're back at square one.
Those walls come up between you and your fiance, and
Yep.
So that's another thing too that I learned is, when you say, you know, it's obviously it's not her, right? And it wasn't my ex-wife, it wasn't Kaylin, but I wouldn't say that. Like, I would just, you said you shut down, right?
Yep.
So she still thinks like she's getting mad.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of saying like, hey, listen, it's not you. I'm just having a bad moment right now.
Yep.
If you can come back in 15 minutes and we can talk about this if I'm ready.
Yep.
Yeah, you're right. Because I mean, what's the stress in the relationship if all of a sudden now she's being coarse to you, which has nothing to do with why you were coarse to her, but now how she's treating you makes you feel
even worse
to her, and it does become a fight. You know, and again, has nothing to do with what is really. It's like, why are you treating me bad? Well, we don't always recognize when we're in that crabby mood.
Yep.
So sometimes it's like, okay, now you're being crabby at me, and why are you being this way to me? And I think we all have a little bit of that passiveness in it. You treat me this way, I'm just gonna treat you that way back.
Yep.
You know, and it's a snowball.
Yep. So that's, like I said, I never did that. I never said it wasn't you. You know, it's not you, it's me. Well, it really was me. It's not you at all.
Yep.
But again, you know, talking to your spouses about that is just,
And that's the important part of it, because everybody's spouse is different. You know, that's why, you know, I never like when people just get on and say information like it's certain. What works for Christina and my wife, our how we communicate is going to be different than your relationship or your relationship, right? And we're all different. What works for one doesn't necessarily work for the other. But that's the power of being open and honest with your spouse, is you can get down to that authentic level to where you can start discussing it from a healthy area, and it's going to be different. That's why if what works for me doesn't work for you, that's okay. Talk to your spouse though and find out. You know, we all have different personalities. We have different love languages. We have different personalities, and spend time with your wife and figure out what is the best way to do that, to communicate. Because remember, she's a person too, or he's a person, depending on if you're male or female. She's a person too, and she's going to process trauma and deal with things different than you do, and that's okay. But to me, it's the when you both get into concert with each other, and you kind of get all those feelings, hard feelings and stuff out of the way, and allow both of you to be who you are, and to be able to process this stuff throughout your week. Because like for Christina and I try to voice all my feelings throughout the day. And if I'm going to do a podcast and I'm feeling anxiety or whatever, for me, when she asked me about it, it does kind of stop me and make me think about it real quick, like, because I can get so far ahead of myself and putting things away and putting them in my memories and stuff in my pockets, trying to prepare myself, and I'm not being authentic. And sometimes when she stops and will check in on me, it all depends on how it's said, right? To me, that can help recenter me and remind me that it's okay to be open, honest, and transparent. A lot of us try to hold it back. So just talk to your spouse, learn about it, learn about each other, and allow grace, for it to not go perfect every time. Allow it to not always be like you're going to see in the movies. Like, allow it. That's in the ugliness is how we kind of grow and we connect with each other. So allow that conversation, allow grace. That's how I see it.
Yeah,
I would agree.
you said a word there that's big in my world right now, and it's a whole episode in and of itself, but authenticity.
Yes.
And I don't think I knew what that meant until the last year, until really I started my new career. And again, I think that's a whole episode in itself, but we lack that in public safety.
Yes.
We lack being authentic.
We don't know how.
You're right.
Yeah. What is that?
Right.
I mean,
because if we're authentic, then you'll figure out who I really am. If you figure out who I really am, you're going to see my flaws. And if you see my flaws, you're not going to like me. You're not going to love me. You're not going to work with me.
Yeah.
Right.
That's what we think.
Well, and I mean, when's the last time, Cory, someone came up to you and truly said, "How are you doing?" And meant it, other than
I was like,
here. Yeah.
I mean, last week?
like in the public safety world though.
Nope.
Or if they did, what's the first thought that goes through your mind? For me, it's, what do you want from me? Why are you trying to be my friend right now?
So honestly, prior to me going to get help, seeking help for the COE, obviously I had to tell my crew, which I was beyond scared, especially tell my lieutenant, because he's that very assertive, you know what I mean? Like the salty dude. Excuse me. But after I told him like what was going on and putting the mask on every day, because he's like, I had no idea. Everybody on my crew gave me a hug because that was my last shift. Like they gave me a hug. Ever since then, maybe, I don't know, once every 4 or 5 shifts, someone would be like, dude, how you doing today? Or if I'm off, like if I'm in kind of that lower speed, people are like, hey, what's going on?
Yeah.
How you doing? Is everything good?
And that's great that your story's been able to impact that, because like you said, it took that change.
Yeah.
Prior to that, I'm sure nobody ever asked you how you were doing, or if they did, again, it was, why are you my friend? Or, hey, do you need help with something?
Yeah. What do you want?
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
There's always
It
that.
was an inch deep.
Yep.
Yeah.
And so in one of the other episodes where I said I got to feel like the brotherhood didn't exist,
Yeah.
that's what I referred to is like, well, and being off on a medical injury is a very telling experience. I can tell you who reached out to me and who didn't.
Yeah.
And some of the people I thought would have didn't. There was people that didn't, or that I didn't think would, that did.
Yes.
So, I think if we can bring authenticity back to the public safety world, some of this other stuff becomes easier as well.
Yeah, and I'm guilty. I've told you guys this before, before I started getting help and was open and honest with myself and started getting treatments and therapies. I was that officer that when we had a police officer who did leave following a police shooting and some other stuff, I was part of the problem. I was young at the time. I saw how everybody else was treating the situation, and I was part of the problem of thinking somebody was weak, somebody left, they weren't made for this job. I was part of that, and luckily my heart's changed because I went through my situation where I was alone and definitely did not feel the brotherhood. So I'm guilty of that. So we're not trying to condemn people that's listening. We're not trying to tell you you're a horrible person, because we all dealt with it. But what we are telling you is there's a better way.
Yeah.
And that's what we want to show you, is a better way. And as we get here, we're getting ready to wrap up this episode. Try to keep it here under 40 minutes. We're around 35 minutes right now. But you guys, we could talk all day, the three of us. We can go on for hours and hours. There's going to be more episodes with the three of us as this continues on. Cory and Sam, thank you so much for joining me again and be willing to tell your stories and to be the voice for all of our silent first responders right now. Because if they don't have the energy or the courage right now to speak for themselves, we'll do it for them until they're ready. We'll stand in that gap and we'll be the voice for them while we help them find their voice. And that's the whole goal here at the 1042 Project. Again, if you guys need help, if you need help, if you're struggling with something, if you're feeling suicidal, or you're just having depression and this job's getting to you, or you're having marriage issues, and you guys, that's what we're here for. Our nonprofit organization is here for that. We want us to reach out to us. There's no guilt, there's no shame. We want to be there for you and help you walk through it. I've dealt with addictions, with alcohol and pain pills and other things. You guys, there's no guilt or shame. We come to lay our issues on the table and to walk through it and get some process it and get healing for all of us. So please reach out. You can go to 10-42project.org. You can go to the website there, hit get connected. Reach out to me there. My phone number, I'll put it out there too, is 515-350-6274. And I'll add that to the information to the podcast as well if you need it. We are here for you. There's no secret sauce besides we're here. We understand you. We love you. And we want to help you and your family get to the health and healing the way God intended it to be. We want to help you get there, to have a better relationship with your coworkers, with your wife, with your children, and ultimately learn how to love yourself. And thank you for tuning in, and we'll see you guys on the next episode. God bless. Have a great week.